next, on the 30th of this month, will be when I hand over the hat from being one of the coordinators at the Women's Center. So to have this event on my second from the last week here rocks. Okay, so who would like to start with your name? Say it loud and clear. And when were you born?
Oh, Shannon Lanaway, first 2 weeks of the 70s.
Woohoo! So let's just, I'm going to write down that.
I'm Lisa Magady, and I was born in the 60s. Pamela Lefty in the 60s.
Gloria Curry in the 30s.
Now, Adams in the 40s.
Laura Good in the last month of the 40s. No!
Gotcha!
I was born in December 1940. Last month was
Change your birthday.
I was born in the middle of the 40s.
What's your name?
Oh.
Who are you?
Bonnie, thank you.
I'm Jane. I was born in the 30s.
I'm Jenny. I was born in the 30s.
I'm Beth, and I was born in the 60s.
I'm Anna, and I was born in the late 90s.
What's your name?
Miss Anna.
I'm Kathleen, and I was born in the 40s.
Okay.
Marcia.
Marcia?
I'm Marcia Brondy, and I was born in the 40s.
I'm Lilith, and I was born in the mid-60s. Nina?
Margaret, I was born in the mid-30s.
And Gitta, I was born in the mid-50s.
Uh-huh. First one in the 50s here. We're filling up everybody. We've almost got it.
Cherie, 1950.
Pat, mid-50s.
Beryl 51. Here we are.
We
Real congregate, Meg 57.
Amber, 86.
Woo! 80s.
My favorite.
Jamie, 48.
Terry, 42.
Betty, 9922, middle of.
What?
192.
1922.
She's born in the 20s.
Oh, 190.
Wow.
Of what? Doris, 1920. Sandra, 1940s.
And then all of the kids.
The kids back
There
there?
in with all 2000s.
2000. They would be in
And 2.
What are you talking about? There's a bunch of kids here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
11 decades.
We did it. 11 decades of Wow. Okay. Because most of the women here are probably pretty familiar with all of the various struggles women over all the years have gone through. There's just two that every year I keep forgetting, and two that every year I like to remind myself. And one is when we got the vote, and two, when in Canada we became recognized as persons. And it's so outrageous, I just feel those two little pieces are important to say. We became recognized as persons in 1929. Reminds me of someone's definition of feminism that says it's the radical idea that women are human beings. And the other one was the right to go to the polls, 1920, and in this is backwards. It says in 1917 we could vote in the federal election. Now, are there any historians here who might be able to correct me on when we actually were able to vote in the federal elections here?
Quebec didn't get it till
40s.
1940.
1940?
But in other places, Saskatchewan, it was, I think, 21, something like that.
Yeah, this says
1917.
And the Aboriginal women didn't get it till much later.
Till like the 60s, right?
60s.
Yeah.
So anyone who says there's not a need for us to remember where we came from and to make a path to make sure that we constantly are going forward, I think they just need to get educated. Okay. One of the house rules, we need to keep this brief for the first go around to make sure that absolutely everybody has a chance to say something. So how about if we just, where should we start? Should we start with Betty because you called this grand? So, and is there anyone here who might be willing to write down some of this? I can write some of it on there. Beth, you want to help me? We'll take turns.
I can help as well.
You can help too. So if there's a couple of different people, that'd be great. Because it would be really nice to be able to get some of these down. There was an old poster that's been around for 30 years that says how to be a fabulous feminist. But Betty didn't cover feminists and women across 11 decades. So, okay, so Betty, for convenience sake, can we just start and go around the circle? Yeah. Are the people okay with that? Okay, and do you mind starting?
Well, I'm going to start with a very brief definition because if I really got started on what experiences have been and what I know about the feminist movement, I've been here for 2 weeks, so I don't think that's it. Actually, in brief, to me, feminism is simply advocacy of women's rights. And that's it.
Good, thank you.
It covers everything.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
And I was about to say the same thing. Equal rights. We're as good as men and should have the same rights that men have in jobs and so forth.
Excellent.
Same power.
Yes. I think I think feminism is where everybody can live happily together at peace, without rancor. To me, that's feminism. And that implies that women are equal and have rights.
Okay, excellent.
Feminism to me is wholly creative anarchy.
Oh, wow.
I'm Pamela, and there's lots of things, but have your women's voices respected.
Excellent.
I'm Mel, and I would say to me feminism is to be yourself and define your own sexuality and label yourself any way that you so choose.
Okay.
Are we at me?
Yes.
Where are you?
Okay. Again, it's Victoria, and it's, again, the self-definition that you, either by word or action, do not allow anyone to have power and control over you, and you speak or act against it.
Excellent. How are the writers doing? Are they okay with what we have? Okay, thank you.
I'm Mark, and it's basically equal rights, although I'd like to get into, I think it also includes, you should have the right to eat, be able to eat, and have water, and necessities of life.
Yeah.
I'm Bonnie. Feminism to me is a political movement of women organized against oppression, all forms of oppression. I don't particularly want equal rights. I want more rights than that. And It's a movement of women to work together and not against each other.
I find myself reading to it's a matter of choice and self-definition.
Did I hear what Jane said?
Sorry, that was no
Yeah.
voice.
Bonnie, can you repeat what Jane was saying?
I forgot it.
Well, I endorse what Bonnie said.
She said she endorses what Bonnie said.
Something about equal rights.
About choice and self-definition, and that you believe it's a political movement.
Yes, yes, it's self-definition.
Yeah.
Jenny, and I think that feminism is simply support of human rights, especially for women, but support of human rights throughout the world.
Okay. I'll do mine too. Okay. Feminism. A dedication to activism for equal opportunities and responsibilities for women in the world. Equitable responsibility and opportunity for economic, social, political, and sexual freedom and responsibility.
I'm Beth, and it's, to me, feminism is to be able to stand in your own power.
Well, I think of feminism as the positive opposition, the strong, powerful opposition to any form of oppression, and in particularly to claim the rights for women, and for children and for any disenfranchised group, but particularly for women, for us to be able to speak our piece, to challenge oppression any place and every place, and to do it with power, activity, and with a group of other women together, and men.
I'm Anna, and I think that feminism is women speaking up and respecting their own thoughts and other women respecting the thoughts around them.
I'm Lilith, and I think feminism is so many of the things that all the other women have said here, the self-determination and the respect, mutual respect for the thoughts and opinions of others, ensuring that that respect is a two-way street, and looking at, having the choices I make respected about my body, my livelihood, my life.
I'm Margaret, and my definition would be self-determination, and for women and all other oppressed people all over the world.
My name is Gitta, and to me feminism is undoing domination of all sorts, and yes, basically in all ways, inside and out.
My name is Cherie, and I would say it's an evolutionary movement initiated by women on behalf of all beings. All it is. Gotta do it.
My name's Pat, and I don't think I can add too much to what's been said already. Pretty well everything I believe has been covered, especially, well, I truly believe in equality. So that's one aspect of feminism that I resonate with.
I thought I was going to say something different until I heard Gitta, and then I realized that really does it for me. Because I was thinking in terms of women coming together and addressing oppression, that thought that none of us are free until all of us are free. But the free didn't work for me, and then you said that, and I went, yeah, it's that women coming together until we have undone the possibility of domination. I might have agreed in there.
I'm Meg, and all of the above, and putting children first.
I'm Amber, and I think it is choice that now, and we always have, and always should have, a choice in what we want to wear, what we want to do, the fact that we can work if we choose to. I think that choice.
I'm Jamie. I think we pretty well said all the things that feminism is. My concern is that it doesn't mean anything because of how other women have to live around the world right now. I mean, that's my concern for feminism. Is how are we going to bring our sisters in other countries along with us with these fine definitions. So it's ongoing, evolutionary, constantly needing to be looked at and worked on.
As the last person, at the beginning I thought it was for every dollar that a man earns, a woman should earn $1 as well, but it certainly is bigger than that when I listen to what everybody says. And I think that it is true that we have a lot of women who are in really unfortunate situations around the world, and I guess we have to do what we can about that. So their dollar is so different from our dollar, but I guess it's really loving ourselves and loving women. So I guess that's about it.
Can you tell us your name?
Oh, Terry.
One of the things, and I'm pretty amazed that within 20 minutes we managed to get through with one statement from each person. There's a lot of different analysis that different people have about why there was a need for feminism in the first place. And myself, I think that no gathering is complete without at least addressing an overall analysis of oppression. And I'm wondering, is there anyone here who would like to, in a very simple matter, address that? I could do it in one simple manner, and then if there's other people who would like to give a very simple analysis to add into that, that might be helpful. I'm going to put oppression, domination up at the top. Of internalized oppression, the lies that we have got to fight against in order to be able to work for women around the world, or even for ourselves, to stand in our own power, as Beth says. That's the analysis I like to use. Is there someone else who would like to come up and add to this?
Well, I'd like to talk about the class system.
Okay.
It's very difficult to be at the bottom in the class system, and it's very difficult for a woman in the working class to find any sense of respect. That's where I came from, and I think class is a very malicious thing. We should try to get rid of it. So I mean, I know that in North America they don't have it, but I don't think that's true.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So give me an example of who would be at the top structure of the class system. If working class is
2% of the population who owns 90% of the wealth or something like that. I don't know what you call those. Nobility, the upper class, not the elite.
That's a good one. That's in our culture, but in India it's not right. You have the Brahmins at the top, and the untouchables of the bottom. So
Okay.
it's not just the Western phenomenon.
It's the whole world.
I'd like to throw a piece in. I read a book a number of years ago. Some of you may be familiar with it, and I'm blanking out on the title and the author, unfortunately. His I guess I'm going to call it a theory, for lack of a better word, is that the oppression of women and the rise of patriarchy coincided with the development of the written language. And his book outlines this in a very logical, scientific way. It's very interesting. He's very pro-woman, as I as I read the book, I saw it, and it makes sense because today, those who are less literate are in terms of the written word, are at the lower levels of class, and they're not the ones that own corporations.
So you're looking at education and the use of the written word?
It's the use of the written word more so than the education, because education, that's just, the definition that we're using there would be education in the use of the written word, but there's a lot of other kinds of education.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'd like to say it's probably before Gutenberg, and it was the development of private property, and who owns it. The property, who owns the means of production, who owns the biggest cows. And the church originally had the written word.
The printing press.
Yeah, so religion is a form of oppression, and used as an excuse for all kinds of oppression in the world.
I don't think it's a form of oppression. I think one of the biggest oppressors have been the various religions, whether they had the written word or not. They were the ones, the gurus of whichever religion you pick, were the ones that ruled the roost and told, usually, nearly all of them were disrespectful. I mean, Jewish in particular, name one that isn't a respectable woman.
Thank you. Okay, Shannon had her hand up. What I will do if more than one or two hands go up at the same time, what I'll just do is number you and try to get you in order.
I would just include racial supremacy of the white colonial sort of and race, because when we look around this room, there's going to be a need for ethnic diversity and inclusion in these conversations all the time, and not pointing accusatory fingers, but a regional women's center has got to include every woman, and so I would say racial oppression and able-bodiedness as well. So women in wheelchairs, women with disabilities, mental and physical.
Just to go with the elite or the class, like quite often some of the name has more to do with who they are than what they do. People are just born into the right name, right family, or the wrong family that has power.
Okay. What I'm seeing here are the excuses and the reasons that people have and how they've managed to oppress others. In terms of an analysis, is there anything else somebody else wants to throw up here? Because I believe that racism, classism, different ableism, all of those fall under the people who have the money create the hierarchy.
Okay, feminism has been developed because women did not have economic, social, or political power. And they sat together in groups like this, smaller groups, and found this out because
they didn't realize it at the time. This was my experience. And what we're experiencing in the world now is the knowledge that men have the kind of power, physical power over women, and have the permission to use that physical power over women in the most violent and oppressive ways. And it's all very well to say, I've got the power, but if somebody is bigger than you and takes it away, you have to survive that. I mean, your women survive it, but it's a real oppression against women and children.
Marcia?
I don't know. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I spent a good part of last night and a good part of today. Sure. I've been very concerned about the Millennium Goals and the discussion. And last week or the week before, I went to that wonderful presentation by the Amnesty International Executive Director at the Capitol Theater. And a statement that I made afterwards was that I was connecting in my own mind and heart these Millennium Goals to end poverty in the world that all these countries have signed up for, to, you know, education and equality and, you know, all these lofty goals to which Canada is a signatory. But they've just eliminated the long-form census. And so in my mind, I was putting together the notion that how can you know when you're going to be able to achieve your goals if you don't have any data to prove that. And so I raised that as a question under the, you know, human rights issues that night. And Alex Neave said, "You've made me think." Oh. He hadn't thought of that part, and it really seemed like a good argument to him. And I've been thinking about it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months now, or since whenever they canceled the long-form census, because sex disaggregated data, now that's a big term, but what it means is counting the numbers of men and women and their opportunities and responsibilities in the world. So you find that out by, you know, finding out who's the head of a household, or who, you know, who's making more money, or the kinds of questions that they ask you on the long-form census, and you get real data about Canadians. And so when you go forward to say, excuse me, we have a problem here, you have something that you can prove it with. So finally, after I'm listening to all this millennium stuff and how Harper's going to speak to the UN, it was the biggest push I needed to start writing that letter. Now, I actually sent a copy of that letter to the Coordinating Collective today. And I've sent it to the Vancouver Sun and the Globe and Mail and the Nelson Star and the CBC and all the politicians of all the parties. And who have any responsibility or critic's role or anything else, in which I very clearly document that Canada's numbers on the...
Excuse me just a minute. Shannon, do you have to leave?
I do.
Can we interrupt for 1
Sure.
minute? She had an announcement she needed to make.
Oh no, I'm just so glad that our feminist culture in the Kootenays is alive and well. I'm so grateful, and thank you for your teaching, and thank you for filming our history. So happy. Thank you.
Hi, Shannon.
Sorry I'm missing it. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There's a thing called the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And it's a UN convention, that Canada is a signatory to, that actually has a review process. And in 2008, when the review process came along, Canada failed big time in several major areas about how it was treating its people, and it documented those areas, the Court Challenges Program, taking equality and advocacy out of the Status of Women's Program. These things were looked at by this body, and they wrote a big paper, and it's on the internet, and you can take a look at what they said. So I used that, and I did a little research, and I put it all together, and I wrote what I think is a really good letter, and we'll see what happens to it. But for me, I was expressing my feminism. I was saying, something has to change. This is not okay. And you can't just sit on your duff about it. And sometimes you need to sit and reflect and analyze for a week, a month, 2 months, or years. But at some point, when you put all that stuff together inside your head, for me, I have to act. And there.
This is perfect because that segues into a couple of things that people brought up. Jamie mentioned it at first and a few other people. But so, Marcia, thank you. So this was an example of some action you took, and you just educated some of us on the census and why the census even matters. I'm wondering if we want to do another go-around and put out what people are focusing on or doing that they believe is important in terms of bringing about change in regards to oppression, anti-oppression, human rights, and women's rights, whether here in your own backyard, in your own head, in terms of standing in your power, or overseas.
I think perhaps it might be useful for all of us to say when we started defining ourselves as feminists and what, I mean, before we get in, that's what I'm interested in.
Okay.
Not what decade is supposedly you were born in, but when did you decide that this is what you were going to do in your life, or that's...
Okay. Part of what you're proposing, Bonnie, kind of, and what was the thing, but what prompted it?
Yes.
Is that also what you're asking, not just on September 1st, whatever, but like...
No.
It's more like what
how did you,
prompted it? Yeah.
when did you decide to define yourself as a feminist?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too.
Yeah.
Okay, well then let's do...
And what was the context?
I would start that.
Okay.
I know I started when I was 3 years old. My mother had a little dollhouse, and she had all the dollies in it, and she said I took the daddy doll, took him out of the dollhouse and said, we don't need him. So I think at 3, I sort of had figured out that women, we could do it on our own. So I was 3.
Okay, well let's go this way then.
I remember, I don't actually know how old I was. I was probably maybe 6 or 7. And I was sitting on my grandma's knee and she said, you're very lucky you can wear pants. Because when I was a girl, I always had runs in my stockings because I always climbed trees. And I just still remember that, like, how lucky am I that I can wear pants? She didn't have a choice. She had to wear a dress, she had to wear stockings. And that's when I realized how lucky I was that I could even have that choice. And I could still wear pants.
I grew up in a feminist household in the 70s as a teenager. My mother was a witness liver, and never thought I couldn't do anything I didn't want to choose to do. That was nice. I think the most important thing that happened for me was in the 80s, when the choice movement was really big, and Morgan Tyler's clinic in Toronto where I lived and all that stuff was taking place. And I didn't know about choice, how I felt about it, but I bought the party line. And that was really hard, to be politically correct and not truly believe that, one should have a choice, because I thought, well, no, I'm not sure about that. Does this make sense? Okay, so I think that was my defining moment when I realized it is about choice, and it is about how I choose to think too. You know, because if it's okay for me not to believe that it's okay to not have choice in abortion, then I'm free to choose how I think. And in that whole evolution, I recognize, of course, there is choice for women to manage their own bodies.
Excellent. Thanks.
Was somewhere like 69 or so, or 68 or 69, I was working as a secretary just because I had no idea that there was... So somewhere around 68 or 69, I was working as a secretary, and I just ended up being a secretary because I didn't have any kind of framework for imagining what all the possibilities might be. But I did know that I couldn't, there was something wrong about it, and the key thing for me was I couldn't, it just didn't seem right that I had to be figuring out on behalf of this guy who I could or couldn't serve coffee to, and somehow that kind of sticks in my mind, right? But I mean, that kind of like symbolism of serving that person's, furthering his life just didn't felt so wrong to me. So I kind of went sideways, stayed as a secretary, and went somewhere where actually I managed to land in amongst a whole bunch of people who created the possibility of thinking differently. And so I ended up in a workplace where one of the other secretaries started sharing material with me at lunchtime, and it was women's liberation then. So if the question is, when did I say feminist? I can't remember when the transition to feminist was, but that was it. It was feminism, absolutely, totally. So it was somewhere in about 1970 that I realized that it made sense of my life. Like all these things that I'd somehow known suddenly made sense by sitting in those rooms with a group of other women, talking and realizing what it is. Yeah. And then it just made so much sense always for me to link it, as I started thinking, to link it with oppression and domination as the key things that are what I would strive to change.
I'm Pat, and actually my dad was way more of a feminist than my mom ever was.
Can you talk a little louder?
My father was far more of a feminist than my mom ever was. And he always said that us girls could do anything we put our minds to. And he was right. And it wasn't until I was much older as a
Can you
teenager
hear over
that
there?
I realized that that was...
They can't hear. They can't hear down there.
It wasn't until I was a teenager that I realized that that was feminism. That's my story.
Okay. I have a question. Were you able to hear when she made her voice louder?
I heard her all along, so.
Okay. Thanks.
Good question. Well, I'm just, that's a great question. I don't know. I'm still learning. There's a stack of books on feminism, still coming into being a feminist. But I would say in the 80s, all of a sudden I realized I was a lesbian, and community. I wanted community, and I was a lesbian, and I had that choice, and I lived that ever since. But I didn't call myself a feminist, though I'm just, like I say, I'm just now growing into what that means, and the responsibility. I like that word. And so, yeah, there you have it. That's my story.
I really admired my older sister. I thought she was really strong and such a powerful woman. And then when her husband left her, I was really stunned that she just fell apart. Like she couldn't sign a check, she just couldn't do anything, and it really confused me. And then, so this was all in the early 70s, and then I was raped by by somebody who I thought was my friend, and I was held hostage in my own place for 5 weeks. But I went to work, but I was too ashamed to talk about it and to find a way out. Like I couldn't speak about it. And then and by the time I got myself out of that situation, I was just so stunned looking back, like, why did I feel that shame? For something that he did. And so then I started recognizing that this huge issue for myself, and then I started talking about it with other women, and then I realized how many women were in that situation with that misplaced guilt and shame, and how they felt their lives were limited due to fear. And I was just so perplexed. And then I went to the women's, and I lived in Montreal, and I worked for the Women's Information Referral Center, and just dove into it. I thought, I want to be part of a solution here because it's a huge problem. And I realized that a lot of women didn't take up space. They didn't want, they were afraid to have their voices heard because they didn't feel safe. So then I started looking for ways to help women feel more safe, so take up more space in the society. So that's the one way I saw changes could happen if women would take up more space. So then I was part of was teaching Wendley Do, and I've been teaching it internationally since, and I've been working with, I was asked in Eastern Europe and Western Europe and then in India, and I've been working there for since 2000, and now since we started, and I've been training instructors there, there's 20,000 women that have gone through this 20-hour program, and due to that there's many women in the little villages and that taking up more space, and I feel very encouraged by that because it's such a core need, safety, and that's how I've been contributing.
Hi, come on in. We're having to gather interview.
How do I get just round up? 1968. Betty Friedan. Consciousness raising.
Oh, yeah.
It was purely personal. I was very unhappy in my marriage. I was very unhappy. So I read her book in 1968. I took a week-long course which was Feminism Light, only I didn't realize that until about 10 years later. Oh my God, Susan was really, she was really giving it to us, but she was just so, she wasn't strident or anything. And, but the steepest learning curve of my life, my politics changed, my religion changed, everything. Yeah. So, out went the church, out went the marriage. Yeah, that's it.
Nice.
I don't know how old I was. I guess, yeah, I had experiences happen in my teens and through my through my 20s and early 30s that each time something happened, I would seek out more information about how to empower myself, or take a look at what was going on from a different angle. And I guess my first sort of introduction to feminism as a I don't know what to call it, was sort of in probably my early 20s, and I was in college, and I had a public speaking instructor who was very outspoken, and one of the things that she taught us was that it was important to have an opinion even if it was the wrong opinion. And I also went to a Take Back the Night march with her, so she's sort of that introduction into that. But it's been an evolving process, I think. There was no defining moment for me. There was no aha moment. There were, as I say though, there were experiences of oppression that occurred in my life at various times, including rape. And those experiences definitely changed my view about, you know, my worth as a woman. I knew that I didn't deserve that, but how did it happen? And so I had to look at myself as well as look at the oppressor and their behavior. And it's an evolving process.
Nice, thanks.
I don't think that I've had like a certain moment either, but I suppose growing up with just my mom, kind of in a feminist aspect, because my dad wasn't around, and it kind of just shows me that you can have such like a wonderful lifestyle and still be empowered without a man. And at this summer I went to a yoga retreat, and they asked, how do you see yourself? And I wrote down feminism, and I just kind of realized then that I'm a feminist. Yeah.
Nice. I grew up in a fairly matriarchal family, with my grandmother, the head of the family, and my mother and two older sisters until I was 10. And I was a super tomboy, so I was always out playing, mainly the only girl, climbing the trees and fighting with the boys and playing softball. And I was always looking for my tribe, you know. And then Girl Scouts, I had a tribe. But I think it was sometime during a protest at the against the Vietnam War in the United States that I realized it was mainly men speaking out. It was mainly men who were in the positions of power, and they were telling us how to act, what to say, what to do. And it's like, wait a minute, where's my tribe? You know, we don't want to do it that way. I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. And so I didn't have a word. But again, in 1970, I moved up to Ann Arbor to the University of Michigan, and there was a whole lot of women who were joining together, reading and having little tiny consciousness raising groups and talking about, like, where's my tribe? Like, I don't want to do it their way. Who am I? I want to do it my way. And they're like, oh yeah, you too? You know, and then exploring and exploring. And it was like, oh, I have a tribe, and this is a tribe of women, and we are feminists. So it was like in my very early 20s, I started using that definition. And it seemed to me that it's one of the few isms that has a positive statement to it. It's not classism, it's not sexism, it's not racism, it's not heterosexism, it's not homophobiaism, it's not any of those things that were like negative. It was a positive empowerment of taking my power with my sisters to say we're going to challenge this. And yeah.
Yeah.
So
I really want to apologize to the group. I brought my daughter because I wanted her to be part of this and I wanted her to listen, and when she got together with her friends that was more enticing and appealing. And I'm sorry for being so disruptive, but I'm going to take them and go now so that the rest of the meeting.
Well, they're being feminists. They're doing what they want.
For me, I'm not at that end of the room. I was noticing them, but they weren't disturbing me.
the sound of children is great.
Yeah.
It's a good sound. There's
So
no
we're happy
disruption.
you brought them.
Okay.
I don't feel the need
appreciate
for them to leave, so I'm just, but that's what I'm only one, but that's my.
I cannot relax.
There you go.
Would you like to address this question, the two of you, before you go?
I could, quickly.
Yeah, sure, please.
I would have to say it's similar. I had a similar experience with my grandmother, who was a little old Italian grandma, who always wore dresses, always wore black until my mother cut up all her dresses one day when she was in the shower because she felt like, and she wore black because her husband died. She was 15 when she married to a 30-year-old man, so he died when she was very, very young. And she spent many, many years wearing nothing but black dresses. And my mom was very, I'm not quite sure how, but she was very ahead of her time, and she always really encouraged my sisters and I, similar to your experience, where both my mom and my dad said, you guys can do anything that you ever set your mind to. You have that power, you know, you can make that choice. And then, but for me, and over my life, I did the comparison between my grandmother and my mother, and saw that they were very different women, and looked at very different ways of living and being and doing. And then when I got to college, I remember very, very well sitting in a class. It was a racism and sexism class, and never ever being able to look at myself or look at other women the same way. You know, it was at that point where I really started confronting, why did I wear makeup? Why were these things important? You know, the way that I dressed and the way that I looked and how I felt, you know, to be accepted. You know, what was important. What I put forth as needing to do and be, you know, how to be in order to be accepted. And myself and a few other women started a feminist collective when I was, you know, a freshman in college, and went to those Take Back the Nights and the marches on Washington. I grew up in the States, you know, going to all those marches. And yeah, so it's been, again, it's also been an evolution for me. And I would just say the one thing I would add, because I am going to leave and, you know, probably go back around, the one thing that I feel like I'm doing is I'm modeling for my daughter. And I'm really trying to be conscious in the choices that I'm making for parenting with her and my son, my boy. I've got a boy as well, because I think it is important to also be raising my boy in a conscious way and in a feminist way. And so my most important job, I feel, is with my two children to, you know, bring up a different generation of boys and girls. So.
Nice. Thank you. Well, grandmothers must have loved him, so it's because both of mine did, and so my one grandmother was a teacher. You know, she would have been like, I don't know, 110 soon. So like, you know, in the 40s or whatever, she's a teacher. And so she really believed in looking out for herself. She didn't get married till she was, you know, in her 30s. And so she was a great influence. My other grandmother also, yeah, she just really supported me in whatever I wanted to do. And really stood up for herself in all ways. That was really, really neat. And also being in junior high and high school, I felt the need to like kind of look out for, or to empower everybody who was oppressed, not just women. And so it just kind of moved on from there. It was like, yeah, you know, like just everybody in our culture who seemed to not have as many rights or equality for me. So that just inspired me, you know, to turn it towards women more as well. So yeah, that's about it. And I'm just continuing to learn and grow.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for bringing the kids.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Again, I don't think there was an aha moment for me. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. I was raised in a very traditional Catholic family, and my father was very, very patriarchal for sure. And I have 4 older brothers and 2 older sisters, but it was very clear from an early age that the brothers were definitely favored over the girls in terms of, you know, who had more power. So I found myself always struggling to compete with that. So I was very competitive with my brothers and everyone really. I was a very competitive child to try and always be better than the rest. So I think a piece of that for me helped me in my journey of strength. So through that passage, my mother always was able to inspire me to find the best path for me. So I think had I not had the strength of my mother, it may have turned out a little differently. But she's sort of been the one that's been my biggest enemy and my biggest fan. So I've learned a lot from her. So, but I did take a journey when I was 18 over to Egypt and spent quite a bit of time. I lived in Israel, and it was at that moment when I realized that not all women had the same opportunities as me. So I think that's sort of when I've got the advocacy piece of me in there. So I feel like I've been advocating for women for a long while. And then a transitioning piece for me was reading the book A Woman's Worth by Marianne Williamson. That was a really big piece for me for some reason. The timing of reading that book transitioned me into starting some women's groups and women's movements, and started a school in Costa Rica for children and just sort of equality and empowerment, and just we did a global peace conference when I was down there, and just worked a lot about peace and equality with women. So that was back in the early 90s. So yeah, so since then I just feel like I kind of seek out places where I feel that I can help empower women, and by empowering women it helps me identify with being a feminist. And so yeah, it's ongoing, daily, hourly, minutely. Minutely is probably not even a word, but anyway.
It works.
Yeah. And especially now working at the Women's Center, I feel like my depth of feminism, it just grows substantially on a minute-to-minute basis. So just when I think I kind of have it sort of figured out, I don't. So it's great. It's such a fabulous learning curve. So, and I'm just so grateful. So that's kind of my little path.